This is the second part of our series about the most disturbing and mysterious paintings in art history. If you haven't seen part 1 yet, make sure to check it out on the channel. In that video, we talked about artists whose works still provoke fear, debate, and endless interpretations. And today, we continue. In this episode, we're diving into even stranger, darker, and more psychologically intense artworks. Paintings that don't scare you with monsters, but with atmosphere, symbolism, and hidden meanings. Some of these artists were far ahead of their time, and their works still leave viewers with a deep sense of unease and mystery. So let's take a closer look at what exactly makes these paintings so unsettling. Another unsettling vision appears in the world of Peter Bruegel the Elder. His painting, De la Gritte, often translated as Mad Meg, frequently appears on lists of the most frightening European artworks. The story is based on a Flemish proverb about a woman so aggressive she could plunder hell itself. In Bruegel's version, she becomes a massive armored figure marching through chaos, dragging loot behind her. Demonic creatures, fire, and destruction fill the scene. Painted in the mid-16th century, during political and religious tension in the Netherlands, the work reflects a world overshadowed by fear and instability. Bruegel traveled widely, including to Italy, and later settled in Brussels. He became famous for his multi-figure compositions and allegories blending folklore, satire, and deep reflections on human nature. In Mad Meg, many scholars see a portrait of an age consumed by greed and hysteria. Both Munch and Bruegel, who lived in different centuries, each in their own way depicted the fragility of humanity in the face of chaos, whether it be personal tragedy or historical catastrophe. Even illustrations for kind fairy tales can become the source of childhood nightmares. Among the artists who shaped this imagery was Ivan Bilibin. Born in 1876, trained at the Imperial Academy of Arts in St. Petersburg, and associated with the Mir Iskustva movement, Bilibin developed a highly recognizable style. Bold outlines, decorative patterns, and meticulous detail inspired by old Russian architecture and costume. While illustrating folktales like Vasilisa the Beautiful, he carefully studied ethnography and traveled across northern Russia collecting visual material. His version of Baba Yaga, thin, sharp, intense, surrounded by a dark forest and a hut on chicken legs, feels genuinely unsettling. Long before folklore studies began analyzing the darker roots of fairy tales, Bilibin intuitively captured their archetypal, ritualistic side. After the Russian Revolution, he lived abroad in Egypt and France before returning to the USSR in 1936. He died tragically during the siege of Leningrad in 1942. Completely different, yet no less intense, was the world created by William Blake, poet, engraver, visionary. During his lifetime, many considered him eccentric. He claimed to see angels and mystical visions from childhood, and these experiences directly shaped his art. Blake developed his own technique of illuminated printing, combining text and image into one expressive whole. One of his later works, The Ghost of a Flea and his illustration of Count Ugolino, inspired by Dante's Divine Comedy, dive into psychological torment. In the story of Count Ugolino, a historical figure imprisoned with his sons and left to starve, Blake transforms the scene into a study of despair and confinement. The physical suffering becomes secondary to psychological horror. Both Bilibin and Blake worked with myth, one from folklore, the other from literature. But both saw the shadow beneath the familiar story. And that shadow still unsettles us centuries later. Art doesn't always comfort us. Sometimes it confronts us. Sometimes it reflects the chaos we try to ignore. And sometimes it reminds us that fear has always been part of the human story, in every century, in every culture. With incredible detail and a level of realism that was almost shocking for early Baroque art, Rubens depicted the biblical story of the execution of John the Baptist. According to the Gospel story, Salome, the stepdaughter of King Herod, performed a dance in front of the king and his guests. The performance impressed them so much that Herod promised to grant her any wish. Influenced by her mother, Herodias, a vengeful and ambitious woman, Salome asked for the head of John the Baptist as her reward. Even though Herod is said to have felt doubt and regret, he did not dare break his oath and ordered the execution. In Rubens' painting, the scene is shown with brutal honesty. Blood is still flowing from the lifeless body. Herodias reaches toward the slightly open mouth of the dead prophet, as if she is still trying to silence him even after death. A young boy holding the tray with the severed head looks frightened and confused. And Salome herself appears cold, almost indifferent. This emotional contrast makes the scene even more disturbing. Rubens was one of the leading masters of Flemish Baroque and served as a court painter in the Spanish Netherlands. But he wasn't just an artist. He also worked as a diplomat, carrying out missions for European monarchs. He had an exceptional education, spoke several languages, and spent 8 years in Italy studying the works of Titian, Michelangelo, and Caravaggio. All of this shaped his powerful and dynamic style, full of movement, drama, and intense emotion, which had a major influence on European painting in the 17th century. Now let's move to a very different, but no less unsettling image. Giovanni Bruegel, The Crying Boy, 1950s. The exact date of this painting is unknown. At first glance, it doesn't seem frightening at all. It's simply a portrait of a crying child. We don't really know why he's crying. Maybe he's scared, maybe he's tired, or maybe just upset. But over time, this image became surrounded by a strange and almost bizarre legend. In the 1980s, the British newspaper The Sun published an interview with a firefighter who claimed that reproductions of The Crying Boy were often found intact after house fires, even when everything else had burned. The story quickly turned into a sensation. Readers began sending in their own similar experiences. Some even mailed the paintings themselves to the newspaper. At some point, journalists decided to put an end to the hysteria. They gathered many of the images that had been sent in, took them outside the city, and burned them. According to reports, the editor even suggested doing it publicly on the roof of the newspaper office. But firefighters refused to take part, considering the idea too superstitious. Despite this, the reputation of the cursed painting stuck, and the story still appears from time to time in discussions about mysterious or haunted artworks. There's also another version of the story. Some claim that the child in the painting was actually the artist's son, who was terrified of fire. But there's no real evidence for this, and most researchers consider it a later myth. Giovanni Bruegel is actually a pseudonym of Bruno Amadio, an Italian painter of the 20th century. After World War II, he lived and worked in Spain, creating mostly sentimental portraits of children that were reproduced in large quantities. His series of crying children became extremely popular across Europe in the 1950s and 1960s, selling millions of copies. Interestingly, some versions of The Crying Boy are sometimes attributed to other artists. For example, the British painter Anna Zinkhuizen. Because of this, researchers believe there are multiple versions of the image, and it's almost impossible to say which one started the famous fire legend. If you're enjoying this series, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps more people discover this content. And if you want to explore or collect original contemporary art, visit alabrio.co, where collectors connect directly with independent artists from around the world.